Hey Creagears, Robo here, and welcome back to a very special episode. Yes, 3 years ago we first co-hosted together with our Spatocalypse custom amiibos. Wow, the channel really has been 3 years old, eh? Or more. I've made something very special that we can also share with all of the Creagears. I've made a Muna custom amiibo with your new design for Splatoon 3. But first let's start with a wireframe, since I wanted to try and make this custom amiibo from scratch. Indeed! So using our reference sheet with a measured octoling, I use this as a base to make Muna from. Making the legs, spine and the arms, and then locking everything in place with some super glue and baking soda. And lastly, I could drill and add an aluminium ball as the base for the head. Once the frame was done and I had the base ready, I started to attach the two. First posing the armature with one leg to the front and the other one resting on the ink, which I will add later. I marked the placement on the base and drilled the holes. Once I got the legs in place, I could then pose the arms and the rest of the body, which we then lock in place with some more aluminium foil for the chest. But before I could add the armature in place with glue, it was easier to first add the ink to the base to not have to work around the legs. So after first adding the main splash to the base, I then smoothed out the edges before I added the two waves that get pushed backwards. Then I had to let those waves solidify. But I still had some clay ready, so I used that to make the base of Muna's body. By using the clay more so to smooth out the rough aluminium surfaces and to bulk out the arms and legs to prepare those for the real clay layers with all the details. Once both of those had had a day to dry, I could then start on the real details. Starting by attaching the body to the base. This gives us a nice attachment point to make the hero snow boots. Luckily these boots are very big with a lot of big details that can just be added with some 2mm EVA foam, so I only needed to focus on making the big base of the shoe and the lips on top. After the shoes were finished, I used some epoxy sculpt to shape the clay to smooth out the pants and the undershirt. After these were done, I used a small snake of clay to make the edge of the hoodie. This was then smoothed into the top with the rest of the clothing. To continue with the snakes, I also used the same technique to make the tops of the snow boots, with a tongue on each front. Then I could get back to the hoodie to complete the transition and to work on thickening the arms. Next, using my biggest ball tool, I make a base for the hood of the hoodie. By taking this hollowed out sphere as a base, I stretched the lowest end to a point. Then I added another thin snake of clay to the edges to make it a bit more sturdy. And finally I straightened out one part of the edge to be able to add it to the rest of the clothing. After which I finish up the hoodie with some more work on the edge to make it lead back to the front of the hoodie. And I also score in the middle for the zipper. With a small piece of 5mm EVA foam in the back to keep some space underneath the hood for the ink pack later. And I also added a score in the middle for the zipper. At last I started to work on the face. First, I still needed to add a base layer to the aluminium foil since we didn't have enough clay during the first phase of sculpting. Now I got the chance to add the clay for the face, the back of the head, and the 4 tentacles. With the 2 longer tentacles in the front and all using the curly octoling hairstyle from the Splatoon 3 promotional material. Using more aluminium foil for the bases of the tentacles to be able to get a good feeling for how these scrolled tentacles actually work before we apply the clay on top. That then leaves us with the task to smooth out the tentacles and using a point and silicone tool to enhance the seams all around the curly hair. But after all of this, it was best to leave the sculpture to stiffen up for a few hours before we started on some more of the deeper details. Like the seam between the top and the bottom of the tentacles. And finally, with a new set of clay, I started on the real details of the face. Starting with getting the shape of the face right. Before being able to sculpt out the outline for the eye on the right side of the face. Then I added the nose. And after a bit more clay to the front of the tentacles, I scored in the mouth. Then we did a bit more work for both the face and the hoodie. Also covering up all of the aluminium foil that was still visible on the tentacles. And after a bit more work on the seams of the tentacle, I added the ears to the sides of the head. Making a ball of clay, adding a straight side, and then pressing in the middle with a ball tool to get the raised edges. Next I added Muna's mask to the left side of her face. First using some clay to make the smooth base, and then adding 2 snakes of clay for the raised edges. Also flattening out those to get more straight edges instead of the rounded ones that would naturally occur. Next I added Muna's hand to a piece of coffee stirring stick, with a little blob of clay from which I first cut out the thumb, before scoring in the leftover fingers around the handle. Only got 2 more things left, with me first making Muna's final hand. Whoops. At least the touch-ups are more in frame this time. Lastly, I added some balls of clay, which I first smoothed into the tentacles themselves, after which I needed to press them flat again, and finally I used a small ball tool to complete the suction cups. And this was then repeated for all 5. And after a little eyebrow, we could then let the figure rest to harden. After drying, I drilled Muna's right hand and glued it in place with some super glue. And the 2 bands and the backing of the snow boots were also put in place with some EVA foam and super glue. all there was left to make was the tri-stringer. For this I started with another coffee stirring stick, which I had soaked in water before to be able to bend it into the shape of the bow using a clamp. Then, using our first Splatoon 3 amiibo as a base, I trimmed the handle to shape before I added the two ends to both sides using some 5mm EVA foam. Then I sanded 3 wooden dowels to points to be able to use for the 3 jets. Same with these long beads that I sanded to have one flat end and the other one just stayed rounded. Finally, I had drawn out the arms of the jets and cut these out. After which I could start to assemble these. Gluing 2 of the pointed dowels to the beads and using 2mm EVA foam to make 2 end caps for the middle of the bow. Next I added a little strip of foam to the seam between the bead and the wooden dowels. And I could also glue the final sanded dowel to the front of the middle piece. After which, 2 pieces of bamboo skewers were added as the handle. And using the 2 arms, both of these and the jets were attached to the middle. Then we had to use the wooden dowel one more time to add 2 strips of EVA foam to both the top and the bottom of the piece that will become the reel. Which, after being cut loose from the dowel, got their arms added with some more stirring sticks for the main part and some skewers for the top. Which, after sub-assembly, were at last added to the rest of the reel. And lastly, a decorative gem was placed on top, and the jets were added to the handle. Starting from the bottom with a dark grey and brown for the snow boots. Next, some gunmetal for a reel. And some black for the pants and the shirt. And the front and back of the tri-stringer. This also gives us the chance to add a base coat for the metallic colors on the mask. And the black eye mask on the eye that is still visible. Then finally some real colors with some green. Then while the green dries, we can add the leather brown to the belt. But before some more colors can be added, I wanted to add some ribbed markings with some white and then some peach again for that Splatoon 3 customized pants style. And a little more black for some of the shirt that's visible underneath the hoodie. And to use it as some more metallic base for the zipper. Then we extended the green palette with some dark green for the ends of the sleeves. With a blocked pattern around the transition to hunker back to her design origins. But not only the sleeves, but also the edge of her hood gets some dark green. Also, the lower edge of the hoodie itself can use a little bit more detail. Also a shame that the dark green needs quite a few coats to cover properly. Like, it's a dark color, how come? Whatever. But then it's finally time for the orange. Starting on the ink. And then transitioning to the shoes with their back guards and the soles. Then moving up to the stride stringer. But then we do need to take a little break from Muna herself to add the orange to the ink pack. This also gives the paint on the finger a chance to dry as to not get all of my fingerprints all over. This gives us then the chance to add the white markers on the side. And the big red marker that goes around the pack. But for the tentacles we have to wait a little bit longer because I want to add the limbs to the bow. With a little cut in the ends of the handle to insert the limbs into with some super glue. Which then allows us to add these little metallic beads to the limbs to weave the wire through at the end of the project. And so, after all 6 were added, we could finally add the gunmetal to the ends of the newly added limbs. Sorry about that, but it did give us a better place to hold the amiibo. So now I could finally add the orange to the tops of the tentacles. Making sure to avoid the bottoms of the tentacles and the suction cups. Luckily, most of this isn't too hard to paint. only the long curled tentacles gave me some difficulty, but even that I was able to conquer. With some reds mixed into the orange to diffuse from a pure mixture at the tips to a 50-50 mix at the 1/3 mark, and then the original at the top of the tentacles. And this is then mixed at each transition point while the paint is still wet. This will then give us a nice transition after which we could then mix some white into the orange to make the little rings that we octolinks have on our tentacles. Using my smallest brush, I make some different size rings all over the lower parts of the tentacles. Finally, I can close out the painting with a mummy's robes or an off-white for the undersides of the tentacles. And of course, the suction cups. And with a little plastic ring added to the mask, we get the final metallic paints. Starting with a gold for the belt buckle and the zipper. And a shining silver for the edges of the lens. With the 9 little holes on the bottom of the mask. Then I use some hot glue for a transparent dome effect within the lens. And this was then finished with a transparent blue on top. And the reel is also added to the front of the handle, with it being spun full of some orange wire. Then as the last thing, I added a gloss varnish to the tentacles, the lens, the eyes, the ink pack, and of course the ink itself. And with that, I can officially announce the Muna Custom Amiibo finished! Yahoo! Hey Creagears, Amiibo here, and we hope you enjoyed this very special custom Amiibo video. And yet again, late very happy birthday to the best co-host I could have asked for. But I have one more surprise. Looks like some of the Creagears have also made you some birthday gifts. And who knows, maybe there could even be more. But that's probably going to be all from us for now. Keep those creative gears turning, and we will see you guys in the next video.